entering politics, how have you made a difference to the city? Yes. Before you entered politics.
Well, I made a difference to the city because I'm a volunteer for Winnipeg Harvest. What I do is that I deliver to women's shelters. Now, sometimes it's a little scary because you never know who's following you. I mean, you got some wackos out there, you know. But the thing is, I do it. I sacrifice myself for someone else's well-being. That's what I do. And the thing is, after this election, I'm more encouraged actually to do some more volunteer work. But that is my main one, Winnipeg Harvest. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, next up is David Saunders, and it's a question about employment. And this question comes from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. Where have you volunteered recently?
Most recently, I guess it would be Winnipeg Harvest. And before that, of course, all sorts of inner city groups that I represented as a lawyer articling with the Public Interest Law Center.
Okay.
You want me to talk for another minute and a half about it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said, would you like another minute and a half?
Oh, no, that's good. No, that's your answer. That's great.
I would just mention, because I've done a lot of pro bono work as a lawyer, the critical mass cyclists, some of you may recall, had some difficulties some years ago, and I agreed to assist them and ended up defending them on many trials. Fortunately, they were all found not guilty of the charges and moved on from there. But it was certainly an experience for me to work with the young people who are cyclists and who wanted to make sure that cycling would be safe on the road, and they used that method of protest at the time. And that was an interesting experience.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Next question goes to Judy Washalos-Solis, and it's on safety. And this question is from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. The Youth Vital Signs survey found there is a huge amount of distrust between youth and police and cadets. This was also expressed by the Youth Vital Signs Committee. How would you build trust between youth and police?
Thank you very much for the question. I think we need to hear youth voices at City Hall at all levels and with all aspects of service, including the police service. I've proposed, maybe we'll get to this later, a youth council based on a roundtable discussion I had with young people that I see as providing advice on an ongoing basis to City Hall on everything from poverty and homelessness to job opportunities to safety issues. The police chief is very interested in hearing from voices in Winnipeg, all voices. I've talked to him on a number of occasions and know that he wants to, in fact, develop a crime prevention model as opposed to strictly cracking down on criminals and providing protection, but to provide the full range of police services and community prevention and protection. He would want to hear from you, and I would encourage that. There's also the Winnipeg Police Board, which is a newly formed organization whose job it is to monitor and advise City Hall and the police department. That board needs to hear from young people in order to make recommendations about stereotypes and treatment of police officers vis-a-vis young people, Aboriginal people, people of color, people who live in poverty, people on the streets. We all have cultural conditioning to deal with. The police officers are no different from the rest of us. We all need to be reminded that everyone in our society needs to be treated with respect and dignity and ensure that we can each contribute to our fullest potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. The next question is for Brian Bowman, and it's on health, healing, and well-being. This question is from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. The question is, how has your campaign set a good example for Winnipeg's youth?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a good way to judge the candidates based, do they practice what they preach? In terms of, there's a number of ways. We've got a younger team, a lot of new faces to the political scene, many of whom have never participated in politics ever before. They're not hyper-partisan. Quite frankly, we've got people across the political spectrum as well working on our campaign, and I think what people are looking for in politics, what I'm looking for in politics, is people who can work with folks across the political spectrum. I'd like to tone down the partisanness. I think there's no political party that has a monopoly on good ideas, and so if I'm elected mayor, I want to be able to reach across the floor, and I want to be able to work with people to get the best ideas for Winnipeg. The other things that we've done is we've got a very warm and inviting campaign office with including a children's play area. I don't know if anybody else has that. Mostly it was for my kids so that my wife and I could get some stuff done in the office. But that's another thing that we do. And then another thing that I'm very proud of is political campaigns, as they go on, from what I've observed over the years from working on campaigns, do get personal and do get nasty. And I didn't want to be part of that. I'm only prepared to win or lose on the right terms. If I get a mandate to serve on the right terms, we're going to have some fun, we're going to move things forward. And if I lose, I want to be able to look my children and my wife in the eye and know that I conducted myself in an honorable fashion. So what we did is we introduced a volunteer pledge. The volunteer pledge requires anybody who's helping out in our campaign to sign on. They're going to be respectful and ethical to other candidates and the media and critics. And there's lots of that criticizing all of our campaigns right now. And that's fair game in politics. But I can only control how our team actually acts. And our team hasn't been perfect. There's been times where I have to give people a tap on the shoulder to say, look, we're trying to elevate the political discussion because that's the type of mayor I want to be with Winnipeggers. And so practicing what I preach has been something that we've really focused on. The other thing, of course, is the substantive policies. Our whole focus, and my whole focus, is on growing a city to 1 million people. And that's going to involve engaging our younger population and building a city for the future for them so that you can invest and you'll want to invest in your future right here in Winnipeg.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Brian. Appreciate that. Okay, the next question is for Paula Havixbeck, and it's a question on housing and homelessness. And this question comes from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. Many families are forced to move a lot or even to live apart due to rental costs and housing quality or availability. How would you make housing more stable for youth and their families?
Okay, well, that's a great question. And, our rental availability in the city is an all-time low, and it creates difficulties for people to find affordable, clean housing. One of the things that I've pledged is redevelopment of the Civic Center parkade to include parking, but to also include some affordable housing units. But that's not enough. I mean, I think that's a good start. I think people want to live in trendy areas, in cool areas with amenities, and we don't have that in our downtown, or at least it's not right there and available. So I think in terms of, I have said in the past that I would continue to lobby the provincial government to put a cap on some of the rental rate increases that force families out of their homes. But one of the biggest things we can do at City Hall is create opportunity for home ownership. When we continue to increase taxes at a faster pace than people's wages go up, we squeeze them out of their homes. And so I've been a proponent of keeping taxes low because it creates more disposable income to either have to enjoy your life with or to buy proper groceries. I also think that we haven't done our best in terms of incentivizing or getting housing in the downtown or in trendy areas like Osborne Village and Corridon. They're at capacity. And so every opportunity we have, we should be looking to create density and have more infill housing. Right now, there is no infill strategy for the core and inner city, which are the more affordable areas in our city, and that would be a top priority under the banner of our Winnipeg, and the work that's been done is to create that infill strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. The final question in this first round is for Robert Falcon-Willette, and it's about poverty. And the question comes from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. The question is, some members of the YVS Forum Advisory Committee said they have often have just $3 a day to spend on meals. How would you handle eating on $3 per day?
So personally, how would I?
Yes, that's correct. Personally, how would you do that?
It's actually interesting enough. There was actually a journalist, because I do actually count my own personal story. I grew up in abject poverty, really, as a child. I know what it's like not to have breakfast, not to have lunch, and not to have supper, and what that means. And to see your mother cry at night because she has to decide whether she's going to be eating or you are going to eat, and that is a terrible, desperate situation. But too many Winnipeggers actually have to go through that each and every day, and this is very unfortunate. Unfortunately, it just seems the city often doesn't have the resources, because we're often debating about infrastructure and what we can do about this, and the province has other responsibilities and other ideas. And Winnipeg Harvest, where everyone volunteers, it seems, which is fantastic, was really supposed to be it was supposed to be something that was temporary, and unfortunately it's become something that's become very permanent in our society. So how does one eat on $3 a day? Well, I was at the food plate, or politics on the plate forum. I hadn't eaten all day, unfortunately, because of the nature of the campaign. And someone who's working for my campaign, or helping out, brought me a juice. It cost $4 itself, a couple peanuts, which was $1, and you add it up, and even just a couple snacks, it was more than $3. So it's something that's very, very difficult. And that's really unfortunate. I think when you think about how you actually go about solving that, obviously it's economic opportunity, because my mother most required of all was not another welfare program. What she really wanted was a good job to actually support her family, a living wage. And this is why I put forward the idea in the city of Winnipeg that we actually need, every contractor actually has to provide a living wage to all its employees. So if you're doing business with the city, you need to have a living wage.
Thank you very much. Next question. Go around another time, maybe a second time, but the next question is for Brian Bowman, and it's on culture, identity, and belonging. And the question is from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. Concerns over cultural discrimination and divides were expressed in the Youth Vital Signs survey and have come out in this election. If elected mayor, how will you build understanding between youth of all cultures?
You're right. It's been the most challenging part of the campaign, actually, to be civil. I have to say, because I know Robert and I have faced some racism during the campaign ourselves, personally. My family's Métis, and I've faced stereotyping throughout my life. Sometimes from people within the Aboriginal community, and sometimes from non-Aboriginals. And it's difficult, because at the end of the day, even during this campaign, I was asked by some people, well, play up the Métis card. I just try to be who I am, and I hope you all do the same thing too. Be who you are. I want people to know me for being Brian. I'm a Winnipegger first and foremost. And Winnipeg, and my Winnipeg, is a tolerant place. We're an accepting place. And the racism that we do see in our midst needs to be called out for what it is. It's intolerance and it's hate. I think what Winnipeggers are looking for in their next mayor is somebody who gets that, who's willing to work with people even when they disagree, and to demonstrate respect and inclusion for all people. In terms of our Indigenous community, I serve as chair of the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and I made an announcement on the steps of this great building a few weeks ago, saying that I want Winnipeg to be the internationally recognized leader in Indigenous art, culture, heritage, and creativity. As our Indigenous community grows, let's celebrate it for what it is. It's a wonderful resource, and it's something that we should all be celebrating. And that goes for our multicultural identity as well. I want everybody to be proud of who you are and where you come from, and together we're going to move the city forward with strength. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. The next candidate to answer your question I pulled from the hat is Paula Havixbeck, and the question is on transportation. And it's a question from the Canadian Federation of Students. Good transit is vital for youth and attracts young people to our city. Our buses, on the other hand, are often packed full of people, don't have great reliability, and can be unsafe. How would you improve these issues?
It's a great question. And, I have taught probably for 10 years at the Asper School of Business. And I asked students the first day of class, what do you want out of your city? And most students, or many of the students now, I think the statistic is up to 25 to 30% of the class leave. And this is the top reason that students are leaving, is because we have one of the worst public transportation systems in Canada. You go to any other major Canadian city and it exceeds what we have. I believe it's fairly reasonable, and we could be doing this even now, but we seem to have roadblocks to providing safe, clean, reliable public transportation. And when I mean safe, when you're in other cities, the bus drivers are not accosted. That's a rare occurrence, let alone passengers. There are mechanisms on board so that you can call for help when you need help. I think it's reasonable to expect that it be cleaned more than once a day. It's a disgrace. And I have been outspoken in my time on council at how we can clean that up. I'm frustrated when I hear that so many people are waiting and missing and are 40 minutes to an hour late for class or for work. It should not be. And I also believe that we need to get on the program with having rapid transit, real rapid transit in this city. We've started something, it hasn't been finished. The biggest reason we can't finish these major capital projects is because we have seen at City Hall that there is mismanagement and a lack of training and skills on how to manage big projects. I'm supportive of having a rapid transit network outlined by many studies, but I think we need to take a look at what we have improved in light of all the fiascos we've seen at City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Next question would be for Judy Waslow-Solis. Judy, this question is from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee, and it's on education. Who is or was your mentor? And do you mentor anyone? Why or why not?
Thank you. And sorry, I called you Noel before. It's Noah, right?
You got it.
I apologize. Who was it's on education and mentorship. First of all, my mentor was actually a woman who is a pioneer in Winnipeg. I don't know if you know her name, but her name is Muriel Smith. She was the Minister of Small Business and Economic Development in Manitoba in the Howard Poly government a number of years ago. But what she taught me was that there's a role for all of us in politics, that our legislatures, our city council, our provincial government, and our federal government should reflect our population, should reflect our diversity. So all ages, including young people, including equal proportions of men and women, including at least 10% Indigenous people, because that's at least how much they represent in the population, and including people with disabilities, and people, of course, from all different ethnocultural backgrounds. And that is such a challenge for us. Today, if you look at City Hall, Paul will tell you this, there's 3 women now out of 16. We're not even 20% of City Hall. That's got to change. Sure, it's fine to say others will look after your interests, but in the end, our voices have to be there really to make a difference. And I have spent many years in political life and have lots of ups and downs and wins and defeats, but in the end, every minute was worth it because it was about actually affecting change and using my voice to make a difference and empower others. And if there's anything I do in this campaign, anything that means anything, it is to encourage all of you to consider an active role in politics and to know that you've got what it takes just by virtue of the issues you are raising and the concerns you have and your desire to build a better community.
Thank you, Judy. Next question is for David, and this question is on employment. How would you encourage economic development to increase the number of jobs specifically targeted to youth?
As far as the city of Winnipeg is concerned, the city, of course, is a major employer, and we ought to return to a serious student employment program, not only summer students, but all year round, because most have to work all year round in order to get through school. We need to pay a living wage, which will be quite a change for the city. And as mentioned earlier, with city contractors, require them to pay a living wage to their employees. Set a good example for the private sector and ensure that people who do work actually are able to support themselves and have more than $3 a day to pay for food. One of the disturbing things is that some 90,000 Winnipeggers do live in poverty, and 70% of them are actually employed, but the incomes they have are insufficient. The arts, culture, heritage, and creativity sectors of our economy, that's hugely important. It requires considerable support from the city in terms of the development of the Exchange District as an incubator and as a site for many of these types of things, studios and so on. But in principle, to be accommodating and helpful to young people in starting things up and getting things going. And I happen to be, through my son, aware of the fact that there are an incredible number of very talented young people in Winnipeg who are doing great things in the arts and culture, in film, in music, and of worldwide significance, and which are below the radar as far as the mainstream media is concerned, but there's a great deal going on. And if ever the group realizes that there are the resources of the city government at their disposal, then we're going to see something really happen, and I hope this election next week is the beginning of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. The next question is from Robert Falcon-Ouellette, and it's on the area of safety. This question comes from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. During our YVS Forum committee meetings, many youth were concerned that volunteers are the ones who are dragging the red. If elected mayor, would you support initiatives like Drag the Red with city resources? Why or why not?
So I hope everyone understands what Dragging the Red is about. It's about the murdered and missing women and the concerns of families that the police and the society is not doing enough in order to locate those women, and some of the families believe those bodies might be at the bottom of the Red River. I think that's a terrible indication of the level of confidence that certain populations in our city have towards the police. That they feel that they actually have to go out and do this by themselves. And I think that's the starting point, but I don't think it's the end point. We can actually change perceptions of how we live together. We can have to work very hard on this, though, and I think we have a good chief of police who's trying to do that, but I think he needs more inspirational leadership on the part of the mayor's office in order not only to inspire police officers, that they can change the way that they do business, the way that they change the way they do their culture, but also populations in the city of Winnipeg and how they interact with the police. That they can see the police actually in a positive light. And they're not always used in a positive light by many people. Now, whether the city should actually be dragging the red, I believe if they were, and I've said this before, I think it would be far safer for the police to be doing it rather than volunteers. And if the volunteers are so bent on doing it, then the police should be standing beside them. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for that answer. And the next question is from Michelle. And the question is in the area of education, and this question comes from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. How are you going to increase political education among youth?
It's probably to set up an example. What I ultimately want as mayor is I want to approach the television stations and to have 10 minutes of the airtime every week at the Monday 6 o'clock news. Primarily is to educate, to tell people what we are doing at City Hall, what we are doing with money, if we have problems, yes or no, where it's going. But second of all, is for public education on everything. Okay, it's education on how to cross a crosswalk, or let's say how to use a senior's disability card when crossing the street, and stuff like that. And that is what I am willing to propose as far as education is public education through the television programs. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go around one more time, and next question is for Paula Havixbeck, and it's a question in the area of poverty. This question comes from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. We all live in the same city, but there are huge gaps between us based on where we live, how much money we have, where we go to school, and more. How would you bridge these gaps and bring different groups together?
It's a very important question, and I can say that in my time on council, I saw the growing disparity and recognized that early on. And you might say to yourself, well, you represent one of the wealthiest areas in the city, yet it has its pockets of poverty as well in terms of some Manitoba housing areas. But when I look across the board, you know, I'm really touched by when children are affected. And we're very fortunate in Pembina Trails School Division. They have access to breakfast programs, meal programs. So I began working with councillors like Councillor Harvey Smith, Councillor Thomas Steen, who have kids coming to school with no boots, no jackets, no breakfast, no lunch. And we match sponsorships up with schools for food. We have regular breakfast programs that don't cost the $30,000 or $40,000 that the school divisions put on it. But I think we need to do more. I talk to David Northcott at Winnipeg Harvest frequently, and over 54,000 people in our city get a food hamper every month. That's shocking. Who are they? They are working people. The majority are on social assistance. So how do we create opportunities for people to succeed? That's been the premise of my campaign, helping each other succeed. Whether it means getting a good job, whether it's a single mom who needs childcare, working with people, people by people, we had a program called Block by Block. It's person to person. What do you need? Because everybody's circumstances are different. Students trying to get a post-secondary education to get a good job, what is at the end for them? You're graduating with record debt. You should have opportunity in this city so you are not at that food bank. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. The next question is for Brian Bowman, and it's on housing and homelessness. Young people want to live in vibrant cities, and for many that means cities that are densely populated, walkable, offer a variety of services including public transit and bike paths, and have lots of public spaces. How will you make this a reality for Winnipeg?
Wow, that's a big topic. In terms of homelessness, if I can maybe speak to that first, the issue of homelessness is something that affects all communities, and Winnipeg is not immune from the effects of our fellow citizens being affected by homelessness. The proposals that I've put forward include bringing a motion forward at City Council to have the United Way's plan to end homelessness endorsed and supported. And it's a good plan. It was had multiple stakeholders that put time and energy into it, and I'd like to see that go through. I'd like to see rooming houses, legal rooming houses, receive some incentives to have them increase the standard of living for their residents. And mostly, I'd like to see those that can't even find a house, many of whom are most vulnerable, who are sleeping under bridges or in back lanes, get the help they need and get a hand up. These are not criminals. We don't need to treat them like criminals. These are human beings, and they need help. And in a compassionate society like Winnipeg, we should be able to do better. I've pledged to provide funding to the Community Homeless Assistance Team through the Downtown Winnipeg Biz to get them 5 more caseworkers so they can go out, actively look, and act as a point of contact for Winnipeggers affected by homelessness. In terms of livability in neighborhoods, I focused a lot of my energies during this campaign on downtown Winnipeg and making downtown a much more livable, pedestrian-friendly downtown. It's the community we all share, and it's what defines a city. The health of a city is usually through the eyes of its downtown. And so I'd like to increase the number of residents downtown from 15,000 to 20,000 in 4 years by having things like downtown seasonal pedestrian malls, having a downtown community center in the Parcel 4 lands. And as Michelle hit me in the CBC forum last night, I do want a off-leash dog park downtown for those residents that have dogs.
Thank you very much, Brian. Next question is for Judy, and it's on culture, identity, and belonging. And this question is from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. During our YVS Forum Committee meeting, some youth said they feel city-owned buildings like rec centers and community centers are not inclusive, with some focusing on certain cultural groups and omitting others. How would you change this?
Thank you, Noah. An important issue for all of us because we aim to achieve a city that is a model of inclusivity, where everyone is treated as equal partners in the building of a city that has a bright future for everyone. And as many have pointed out in this campaign, we've got quite a big divide in the city between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. We've got some frictions between new immigrants and Aboriginal people. We've got frictions between well-established white communities and non-whites, and we've got friction between men and women. And it's time, in fact, we recognized the talents of everyone and started working towards inclusive facilities and programs, starting with the city. Now, many would say, oh, the city's not responsible for enough to make an impact, because poverty and homelessness are often dealt with by provincial and federal governments. My position is that the civic government needs to say issues about fairness, equality, and inclusivity are the city's business. And we can start by using everything at our disposal to open up our doors so that everyone feels welcome. And that includes recreation centers. And I know in this room there are groups that need to get together and talk about it. There's the Aboriginal Youth Organization that has been fighting like crazy in the North End to get a 24/7 recreation center. I've met with new immigrants and refugees who have told me they don't have access to appropriate recreation facilities, leisure activities, and other opportunities where they can actually learn about our Winnipeg society and enhance their opportunities. We have to be a model of a city that says diversity is a treasure that we must celebrate, and equality is a principle that must be at the root of our city's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Next question is for David, and it's in the area of transportation. The question is, many young people rely on their bikes to get around. How would you improve their safety?
The very first thing I would do is insist that all of the existing bicycle paths be properly signed according to national standards. They are not in Winnipeg, and it's very dangerous, the lack of the signs for both drivers and cyclists. Secondly, I reviewed the new pedestrian and bicycling strategies, which have been prepared after lots of public consultation and are ready for consideration by City Council. I would endorse them. There's a big ticket to them. The total expense over 20 years is to be some 300 million. We don't have that right now, but at least half of that is for overpasses of major streets, which is a nice to have, but something we can wait a little while to get. But there's some very important things that can be done to close the gaps on existing routes to make them much safer. And I do endorse the notion that Bike Winnipeg has put forward to adopt a Vision Zero policy, where we try to see to it that there will be no deaths and no major injuries again on our streets. And it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of understanding between motorists and cyclists, but the City of Winnipeg has a primary role to play in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. The next question is for Robert Falcon-Ouellette, and it's in the wild card category. And the question is from Arden at Studio 393. How would you bring business to downtown Winnipeg?
So a lot of candidates have been talking about the tax rate for businesses, but in fact, when you think about taxes, that's not actually what makes a successful business. It's the amount of customers that you actually have coming into your business, buying your product to make a business that can sustain a family, sustain a society. And so what I propose is the downtown parking lots. So we have all these surface parking lots. There's over 208 of them. To tax them with a land value tax, as if they were 4-story buildings, in order to generate $26 million in revenue, and force the land developers who live in Montreal and Vancouver, some do live here, to actually start developing our city property. And the reason for this is, this will actually spur along construction. And these will be good paying jobs for young people, but it'll also bring about more affordable housing, because we can also use inclusionary zoning to ensure that there is a certain amount and percentage of affordable housing, co-ops, and also social housing. But I don't believe in social housing where it's all congregated in the same spot. I prefer this when it's spread out, because I can congregate all the problems in one spot and you create problems in one spot. So, The idea, though, is to use the land value tax to actually develop the city for the long-term future of everyone in the city. And so the more higher density you have in the downtown core, the more your business will be successful. In relation to that as well is how you actually attract people downtown. So a lot of people believe that we actually need more police officers, more cadets running around downtown, but I've never met anyone in the suburbs who comes downtown in order to have a conversation on the weekend with a police officer and ask him how his weekend is. That's unfortunate, because they're very interested individuals. Why they come downtown is actually to come to festivals. They have to be attracted. And so instead of spending $800,000, as one candidate has proposed, on new cadets, actually spend $800,000 on doing something like having a festival over 80 nights at $10,000, getting free concerts. And people will be spending more and more money. And this is what we need more in the city of Winnipeg.
Thank you very much for that. The final question in this round will go to Michelle, and it's a question on health, healing, and well-being, and it's from the YVS Forum Youth Advisory Committee. The 7 teachings, also known as the 7 grandfathers, is a set of teachings on human conduct towards others. Which of the 7 teachings resonates with you and why? And I can remind you the 7 teachings are wisdom, love, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, and truth. So which one would resonate most with you? And maybe explain why.
Probably truth, no, because I've been fighting about that throughout my whole campaign. It's about being honest and to be truthful. It kind of reminds me of a little story too. Is that a couple of years ago I entered this contest. It was called Mr. Gay Winnipeg, and we had these things that we had to do around town. And one of them was to talk to the Gay Resource Center, to talk to kids that were about 13 to 16 years old. And you know what I told them at the end? No, is that they have to be linked with the older society in regards to the gay world, because we have to stick together. We have to stick with the truth, what has happened in the past, what is happening at the present time, so we can find a link to solutions. And you know what I told them at the end? I said, when you see an older gay